Watch the splinters. Don't want to stick you. Here.
It's gonna get in here. It's gonna kill it.
Discover the Horror Podcast.
So there's a famous story that's about 1,500 years old that talks about a young prince whose father, the king obviously, decided to protect his son from having to witness the age, death, and disease that unfortunately befall all of us. He locked his son in the castle and kept all infirmity away from the castle. But eventually, as young people were prone to do, the young prince snuck out and he saw people dying of old age and disease, which so troubled him that he left his cushy life at court, resigned his titles, and went into the woods to contemplate life. Now, obviously not everyone has such a strong reaction, but the young prince, whose name, by the way, was Siddhartha, would eventually uncover many of the secrets of human existence when he turned into the Buddha and invented a whole new way of looking at the world that begins with, honestly, a pretty dour statement, and that is that all life is suffering. So we might even say that it was the emotion of horror that brought Buddhism into existence, but certainly one of the most important things that horror can do for us is provide us with a place to work out some of our most negative emotions. And the history of the horror genre is studded with monsters and situations that stand in as metaphors for some of the most troubling aspects of human life. Monsters we can use to help us sort out and make sense of our own negative emotions and negative experiences as we spend our time spinning around on this big old rock. But you know, sometimes horror isn't a metaphor at all. Sometimes horror takes real things that we're afraid of, collectively and individually, and plops it right at our feet and invites it to crawl right up our legs and into us. And body horror is an interesting microcosm of the horror genre writ large. There's several types of body horror, from the silly to the cerebral to the visceral and kind of everything in between. But all of them share one thing in common, which is a sense that a body is supposed to behave in a certain way. And when it fails to do so, it's either terrifying or disgusting or both. Now, for me personally, there's no type of body horror that hits more closely than the kind that comes as a result of contagion and infection. The notion of outside invaders colonizing my own human body and wreaking havoc is the fastest way to give me the willies personally. There's actually names for extreme cases of this: disease phobia, pathophobia, or nosophobia, which is a word I learned today. If you're like me, if you're afraid of the idea of your body going absolutely nuts because of outside invaders, this episode's going to be a wild ride. So grab a glass of OJ to boost your immune system, because you're going to need it. Welcome to Discover the Horror. Our goal is to introduce you to horror you've never seen and give you new ways to see horror you've loved for years. I'm Aaron Abishan. I teach film studies and film production at a university and write about horror just about anywhere I can.
I'm John Kitley. I'm a staff writer for Horror Hound magazine, and I run Kitley Script.
I'm Damian Glonick, co-creator of Living Dead Dolls.
And on this episode, we're going to take a look at some modern examples of contagion-based body horror as we dig deep into Splinter from 2008, Thanatamorphose from 2012, and Contracted from 2013. But before we dig into the films, as a subgenre, how do you guys rank body horror? Is it one that you like a lot, or is it one that you can kind of leave on the table, or what?
Depending, like The Fly, that kind of body horror doesn't bother me. A little bit of gross here and there, but some of the movies that we're gonna cover tonight, pretty damn disturbing.
Yeah, it depends. I think it all depends on the movie. Some of tonight's movies I really like, and others I could leave on the table. And then obviously you have the king of body horror, Cronenberg, which shows body horror in a fashion that he's fascist body horror. In a fashion that's very different than the types of movies that we are watching tonight.
Yeah, and I think that so much of it flows from Cronenberg, and we've already done a Cronenberg episode, and I was remiss in not looking it up. As soon as we started, I thought I should have looked up the episode number, but it was relatively early in our time doing the show. But Cronenberg certainly feels like an origin point for so much body horror. And one of the things I think we were successful at, there are echoes of Cronenberg in these three films we're going to discuss, but I don't think any of them feel like they're trying hard to be inordinately surreal, nor are they trying very hard to explore themes that are symbolic of much of anything else. Except maybe in one case, I would argue. But I like these particular kinds of body horror films because I'm interested in disgust. I'm fascinated with disgust. I mean, people talk a lot about the emotion of fear as being the only thing that horror is supposed to do, but I've had this real epiphany over the last 5 or 6 years that disgust is just as important, at least in my path through the genre. So these are all movies that in one way or another elicit that emotion, and I'm just sort of fascinated by that. So these were all an interesting watch for me. I will tell everybody though out there, as we were in the middle of preparing for this and during the time that we were going to record this, I came down with a 2-week long mystery illness, which is a really shitty time to watch a bunch of movies about contracted disease body horror. I just got to say that is the wrong time for it. So, especially when both of my eyes turned blood red, and I'm sure that we will talk about why that was particularly horrifying when we get to at least one of our films.
I don't mind. I think the difference that I see these is if the entire movie is about the body horror, then that's when I get a little leery of them because it's just disgust after disgust, and there's multiple things, not just body horror in here that are kind of disgusting in a different sense of the term. But like with Cronenberg, you always have other stuff going on. There's a plot, there's characters in this with some gooey stuff. Two out of these three, there's just gooey stuff. Ugh.
And I got to say that for me, that has become so interesting because disgust is one of the only emotions that even talking about the emotion of disgust, if you talk about it for very long, people will shut you down. It is one of the few emotions that comes with a negative physical reaction in almost every case. You know, nausea is often a follower of disgust. And so I've done a really deep dive into disgust over the last few years through a lot of academic reading that I've done, but I'm just fascinated with it. So it has really, I think that has really changed how I watch these movies. Because one of the films, my quote unquote film, my pick for tonight, Thanatamorphose, was a film that I don't know how much I would have liked before I started this journey I'm on. But as I have been on this journey, I found that film really fascinating.
And, you know, disgust in itself can be taken in different ways too. The way we're looking at disgust in these movies is by literally disgusting visual appearances, where, you know, disgust could be something that is an act upon someone that is just, you know, disgusts you, and it's not so much a visual thing as, you know, what you're perceiving.
Which some of these movies had that.
In academic circles, there are somewhere, it depends on how they slice it up, but there are somewhere between 7 or 9 what they call elicitors of disgust. And it's things like you said, like, you know, there's social disgust where you're
Yeah.
disgusted by somebody's politics, or there's animal disgust where, you know, like I always say this one, like if you're swimming in a creek and you feel something slimy on your leg, you're going to jump out of the water, right? But that's not the same thing as seeing what they call body envelope violation disgust. And body envelope violation disgust is the one that we're going to talk about, which is there's 2 aspects to body envelope violation, and both of them are exactly what body horror is about. One is gore, or the idea of opening up the body and seeing the insides, and the other one is deformity, which they use different words, but that's basically what it is. So, I mean, I think body horror is almost always deformity and gore, right?
I thought body envelope horror would be when you slice your finger on the envelope thing when you the little sound. That's
That is a body envelope violation right there. That's
yeah.
for sure. The other thing I was going to ask you guys, just because I gave my own little bio at the front of the show, how do you feel about this notion of contagion as being something that's scary? So I'll tell everybody out there, a few years ago, many years ago now, it's probably 10 years ago, I had a Halloween party. I decided to change it up, and it was like, come is the thing you're most afraid of. And I found a hospital gown and one of those IV bottles and the whole nine. I put dark circles under my eyes. Being sick is something that I'm not very good at. So these kinds of films really nail me. What about you guys? Are these is this an effective kind of horror for you?
I think with the whole COVID situation that recently hit a few years ago, it really changed everyone's perception about a contagion disease, and we were struck with a disease that we didn't really understand what the effects were, and we're told through the media that if you could die from this and don't get infected, and I think we treated it like holy, like literally the plague of our time, where perhaps if we never experienced this, I don't know if how much a contagion body horror I would fear in real life. I mean, obviously it's fucking sick, horrible shit that I don't want to experience, but not something I'm necessarily afraid of.
Yeah, watching Ebola syndrome years ago, that to me was like, okay, I don't want to get that.
Yeah, when that was hitting Asia, and what they have, like the bird virus or flu or something like that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it had really no effect on us because we weren't really getting it over here, but it seemed like it was pretty heavy hitter over there. But I mean, when COVID hit, it affected the world.
Diseases don't bother me because, I mean, I'm the type of guy that if I get a really bad cold, I'm convinced I'm dying just because I'm a wimp when it comes to that. But I've never gotten anything bad enough to where you're like on a week long bender where you're just like death hung over and crap and stuff's falling off. And
Hospitalized.
that would, yeah, that would get to me.
Well, and that's probably part of it. I had it was now 10 years ago, 2014. I took too many antibiotics for a dental infection that I had, and I got a thing called C. diff, Clostridium difficile, and so I was sick for 3.5 months,
Jeez.
and and I was really sick for about a month, and you can read up about C. diff and all the various intestinal issues that it gives you, which is pretty gross, and we don't need to go into all that. But another thing that it did was just made me feel nauseous and dizzy for 3 months. And so that was a pretty hellish time, and that's when it tipped for me. I think really is uh, between that and then having a mom die of cancer. You watch somebody fade away in the hospital. Not to be a big downer, but I think that these things are the kinds of things that we come to horror for sometimes because there's something almost homeopathic about it. It's like this is a
Yeah.
thing that freaks me out. I can come to this and kind of deal with it in a way here. I can see it and go, okay, well, at least what I'm going through right now ain't like that. It's not that bad. So
I think as we get older too, and our bodies change, and we go like experience more health issues or whatnot, we're maybe a little bit more prone to like, this isn't good.
yeah, yeah.
My body horror is eating really spicy Indian food. That's the extent of it.
You're right, though, Damien. It's funny. I was talking to my wife recently, and I said something. I just offhandedly said, I was at the pharmacy the other day. Like I'm at the pharmacy once a week now, and I realized that there was a time in my life where there was like a 10-year period, maybe 15-year period, where I never had a prescription for anything, nothing.
Sure. Yeah.
And now I'm going like, it's like they know. I walk up and they're like, "Hey, Aaron, been 2 weeks since we saw you this time." As our lives change us, the kinds of things that we come to for entertainment and for kind of like our own personal low cost therapy change, and it's like, well, this body horror stuff isn't, I've always loved Cronenberg and I've always loved the surreal and the cerebral side of it. But now part of me, I think, just likes the part that like I said, I have an academic interest in that, which is gross, but also, I don't look like I used to. That's another thing, I look in the mirror and I see somebody who doesn't look like what I expect to see looking back at me because I see this man with a white beard and, 20 pounds overweight. And that's also kind of a form of body horror,
Once your eyesight goes more, then you won't even realize you're looking at it someone else.
This is very true.
As we get older and we watch this body envelope horror, we're like, that doesn't seem too far off right now.
God, I hope not. Or I hope it is. Jesus.
The horizons are getting closer all the time. Yeah, but there are some things that happened in tonight's in the films we will discuss in this episode that I really hope never happen at all, you know. But that's the
No.
beauty of body horror, is that it takes it so many steps further than anything that could really happen. And that is one thing that's true of all of our films tonight. None of these things seem plausible, and that is one of the things that makes them kind of a fundamentally nice little escape on some levels.
Some of them.
Pull over. Hello? Hello?
Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Get inside!
All right. We're going to start off with a film that won't make you hate life afterwards. The 2008 film Splinter, directed by Toby Wilkins. Yet again, a very simple story with a very small cast, but draws you in right from the beginning and lets the tension and the suspense fly. We first see a secluded gas station where the attendant is out taking a break when he hears something moving around in the grass. As he investigates, he is attacked by something. Looks like a dead animal of some sort, but it's definitely not dead. Then we meet up with our main cast, which are two sets of couples that are completely different. We have Seth and Polly, played by Paulo Costanzo and Jill Wagner, that are on a little camping trip that doesn't go too far. And then Dennis, a criminal on the run, and his druggy girlfriend Lacey, played by Shea Wiggum and Rachel Curbs. After a tense meeting where Seth and Polly are taken hostage by the couple, they all drive off in the same vehicle. This is a very tense opening because we can see that Dennis is not to be messed with, and Lacey doesn't seem to have both feet on the ground, which puts everyone in danger. They all end up at the same gas station from the opening that now looks deserted. When Lacey goes up to use the restroom, she finds the attendant from the beginning still somewhat alive and asking to be killed, as his body has become riddled with these little spines or thorns as it twists around, making some very terrible cracking noises. This organism, once it pokes you with one of its splinters, it starts to infect your body, slowly taking control in very painful ways. As she runs back to the front of the station screaming, this creature is in pursuit, and shit gets way out of hand really quickly, with most of them trapped inside the station. They figure out just how to get, as they try to figure out what this bloody, gooey human body tinker toy thing is, as it tries to figure out how to get inside at them. I love the simplicity of this story because it's a very small cast, and it pretty much takes place all in one location. What sets the story apart and will keep your attention is the originality of the creature, how it works, and what it does to you when you do get infected. The characters go through their own little changes, making us see them differently than we did in the beginning. But for me, it is really the combination of the outstanding creature designs and the effects work by Quantum Creature Effects and how it is shot. There's plenty of quick cuts and fast camera movements, which can be done to hide some of the effects details, but it's used here to build up tension and keeps the pulse pounding. Every time I watch this, it impresses me more and more, and I wonder why more and more people are not talking about it, which is why I chose it for this episode. What did you guys think?
The Thing with spikes. That's what I thought.
Spiky.
It's like it's Spiky the Thing in some ways, without the capacity to mimic other people, but it has the same kind of thing where, you know, one of the things I thought was really impressive about it was how all the little pieces would keep coming after you. I thought that was a nice little touch where, you know, if a piece of it gets broken off, that piece is just as dangerous as the much freakier, larger whole.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like about this movie is it doesn't try to spend any time explaining anything. You know, it just jumps right into what's going on, and you never really learn why that thing is there or what it is or where it came from. It just is.
Yeah, this is my second time seeing this movie, and I really enjoyed this movie a lot. It's a simple man versus monster kind of movie, and it doesn't go much further than that. And it's a nice short, less than 90-minute film, and it gets right to it, and it definitely delivers on every angle. I think the interesting body horror aspect of this film is you're dealing with an organism who inhabits or infects a human host, but it doesn't really understand how the human body works or how it's supposed to move. And it just kind of twists and distorts it into these very unnatural, you could break both your legs at the knees, and this organism doesn't understand that you should crawl or something because of that. So it still tries to walk, with two broken legs or something like that. And it just really visually shows a disgusting, heaping mass of what was once a human reflection. It's really effective.
And it also combines parts.
Yeah.
Like it'll take
Yeah.
parts from one body and basically connect itself to another piece. So you have this meat puzzle type thing going around. One of the things when talking about body horror, one of the things that makes me cringe the most is finger trauma. Whether people are pulling fingernails off or breaking fingers, and the
Tonight's a shitty night for you then.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's why I'm saying. But in this one, when it gets infected and it starts to take control of like your arm, your fingers start to crack and bend backwards or break backwards. And the sound of the cracking just makes me cringe every time because when you see the guy holding his arm and his finger literally bends backwards the opposite way, ugh, I hate that.
It's one of the things that I thought this film did particularly well because they drop you, the beginning of this film drops you into a series of things that happen so quickly, and yet they do a great job. So they do a great job at the beginning of giving you the two protagonists, giving you them having a little interaction where you kind of get to understand their personalities a little bit, but more importantly, you just get to like them a little bit, and then all of a sudden we're off to the races with this kidnapping plot. And then, like you said, John, then very, very quickly into this movie, within the first 20 minutes, they're kidnapped. There's a lot of serious stuff that's going on there. They wind up at this gas station. We open the bathroom door, and there's this guy laying on the ground twisting and cavorting with spikes coming out of everything, raspily saying, "Kill me." And it happens so quickly that you don't get a chance to sort of empathize with what he's going through. But they circle back around later with another character. And like you said, you get to see the fingers break one at a time. And then if you recall what the guy was going through by the time it gets to the point where it's taken over his whole body and he can still feel everything, but it's breaking everything and sticking spines out of everything, you realize that not only is this a horror that takes you over, but you get to remain mostly cognizant and conscious and able to feel pain the whole time, which is a pretty terrifying set of concepts.
The other thing I like about this movie are the characters are believable. You could feel like these are really people in a situation that are not doing stupid things like running into the woods or when it's dark and they have no flashlight or something like that. It's like they're doing realistic things that if you were in a situation that would come by, and one of them being a was he, I believe, a biologist student
Mhm.
or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
he was really interesting that he was a biology student, science nerd, kind of on the weaker side. It wasn't like a super tough guy, certainly in the face of the kidnapper who's like this macho guy. But when it comes to trying to understand the situation they're in and find a way out, it's when his intellect kicks in and he becomes one of the strongest characters because of that. And it's not done in a way where someone's like just like, oh well, like if I rub two sticks together I can create fire. It's like, no, he's a biology student. He understands the way organisms work and can figure stuff out on that aspect, which I thought was believable and interesting.
I also like the fact that when they're coming up with an idea to set a fire, and he's like, "We're on top of gas tanks. Setting the fire in here is not a good idea." So you have some somewhat believability of what they're trying to come up with as far as a plan, with someone going, "No, no, 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 I don't think that's just the smartest idea." Plus, you also have these characters that are not completely black and white. That Dennis, the robber, the kidnapper, obviously knows that his girlfriend has got issues, whether she's coming off of drugs or on drugs, but he still cares about her and he's not gonna just leave her to go. I mean, it shows more of a depth to his character than this, criminal badass or whatever. And I did like that.
To your earlier point, Damien, I think that there's a lot to be said for this movie as kind of a counterpoint to the overarching theme of The Thing from Another World, which I think is a kind of a Howard Hawks constant, to be kind of dismissive and suspicious of scientist types, and to be more like, it's the army guys who are really going to, it's the tough all-American guys who are going to do the job. And it's kind of sets you up, especially during the kidnapping sequence early on, to be like, man, I wish that the main character was a little bit more macho, or wasn't such a like wilting flower. But ultimately, the success of their program, the survival that happens in this film, not to give anything too much away, but is at least mostly contingent at one point on the fact that he understands something about biology.
Yeah.
They science their way out of it before it's all over.
Right. I mean, honestly, if this character wasn't in the movie, everyone would be fucked.
Yeah, mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
If I was in this situation and, instead of him, I would have us all dead because I don't know anything about biology.
Yeah.
Getting back to the body horror element, there's a scene in there where the creature's trying to get in, and it's putting one of its arms through the little drive-through or pay window, and there's a part where you can just see the skin being scraped off as
Yeah.
it's forcing its arm in there. And this time I remember watching it going, okay, kudos to whoever figured to add that little element, because you're in this very intense situation where the creature's trying to attack them. Oh no, let's add this little element where we're going to show the skin just peeling off the guy's arm or the creature's arm. I thought that was a really nice touch.
Yeah, great effects in this movie, though, and the creatures, what little you did get to see of them, looks fantastic, and that almost made me a little disappointed because I wanted to see more of the creatures because they just were so original looking, but the jerky camera movement was and such quick cuts whenever it almost focused on it. It was a little jarring in a sense, like, oh no, just sit still for a second. I want to see more of this.
I think they do that to kind of hide.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, this is a
stuff.
low budget film, and they did the tricks necessary to.
Plus, it's all practical effects.
Yeah, right.
There's no CGI. It's all practical effects.
It's done in a gas station with like bright fluorescent lights. It's not in the dark. There's no darkness to hide these things. So,
Although by the time we see the final sort of monster showdown, whenever the monsters, well, I don't want to give too much away, but they do knock out some of the lights,
Yeah.
which makes it a little bit easier for them to. It's convenient, but it's also really motivated. Everything that happens is motivated. And kind of to your earlier point, Damien, one of the things I really like about this is that, the things that happen, they build suspense around doing the kinds of things that smart people would do who had a moment and could think, like that whole sequence when they're trying to grab the walkie-talkie, or the sequence where the cop is at the door and pointing the gun, because of course a police officer isn't going to back up because a bunch of people are screaming there's something out there. Of course that cop is not going to walk away from a dangerous criminal because, but even though all of us in the audience are hollering along with everybody in the gas station, go back to your car for God's sake, So they do a good job of building a tension that exists between the characters and also between the diegetic action and the audience. The stuff that's happening on screen, not every character knows what's going on all the time, and we benefit from that. And it's all just done in ways that felt very believable to me.
The guy that plays the creature, his name's Jamie Henderson. He was a 3-time All-American gymnast, and he's the poor bastard in the meat suit that is walking upside down on his arms backwards and all that stuff. And on the Blu-ray or on the DVD, they show behind the scenes of him trying to figure out how to move as the character, as the director's going, yeah, that's good, that's good. And then you figure that guy is in this prosthetic, this huge prosthetic, and then still trying to move around. How in the hell he could see even? So major kudos to that because it's pretty effective. And anytime you can come up with a creature that is not like anything you've seen before, you got to give credit for that because that is amazing.
And kudos also to the crew in general on this, the director, the cinematographer, and the editor. Um, this is a small, lower budget film, obviously, and you can see that on some levels, but it's also, I mean, almost every camera setup is unique. You know, like there's a lot of coverage here, and they use it really well, and they're smart about how they use the kinds of camera setups and the way that they decide whether they're going to go handheld and how that handheld action works. A good example is if you watch, kind of some of the stuff that's happening when they are just in the whatever the SUV that they drive up in. There's a lot of lockdown camera stuff. We're seeing both in the front seat and the back seat of the vehicle at the same time. Not a lot of frenetic movement. And then by the time we get into the gas station, there's a sequence where Seth is looking for a key to try to figure out how to get the back door open. And the whole time the camera is just dancing the way that, because he's going through everything, and it's like it's mimicking the way that he's sort of trying to look around. So even as we're watching him, the camera's kind of moving, and the whole early part of that part where they are the series of sequences where they first get in the gas station, you can't, because the camera's like that, you can't map the floor. The audience doesn't know where anything really is in relationship to anything else. So it creates this really nicely disorienting kind of sequence or series of sequences that really builds the suspense. So they were really smart about how they did everything that they did. And the performances I thought were all really, really quite good as well.
The unfortunate thing, though, is, this is a really good, solid indie horror monster movie, and the director went on to follow up with Grudge 3, which was very lacking and almost maybe, in a sense, set up to fail. And he never really returned to do any kind of other standout horror film. Full length, anyway, I should say.
I remember looking that up and going, why has this guy not done anything else really as substantial as
Yeah,
Splinter? Because this was amazing, and I'm sure taking Grudge 3 was a good uh, foot in the door, so to speak. But
sure.
yeah, it's just a shame that we didn't see him go on to do better things or bigger things.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a good, solid, quick in and out, good old fashioned monster movie.
I think that just shows you something about the industry. There's just less and less and less infrastructure for, I mean, for lower budgeted films, and what lower budgeted means now is not the same as it used to mean. I mean, there was a time where a 5,000 or a $5 million horror movie was a hell of a horror movie, and now it's not much. I don't know what the budget for this thing was, but I bet it was millions of dollars.
The funny thing though is, and this is what kills me for an independent or low budget film, um, a majority of the film takes place with the creature. So it's not like just a character study with people in the gas station stop. No, there's a monster running around. So they're having to deal with all the effects, the waiting for the setups, and all of that stuff. And there's a few explosions in here too. So it's there's a lot going on here. So again, I give them a shitload of credit for making it as effective looking as it does. Um, and I do have to point out, and I know this is kind of a spoiler, but it's my favorite line in the movie where Jill Wagner's character, she's like, "Oh, okay, hang on, it's okay, we're cutting your arm off." like, like, okay, it's all right, no problem. I never want to hear that.
Yeah, that's right. It's almost
I
never
can't.
okay.
Yeah.
I can't find the budget information, but according to IMDb Pro, the opening weekend, this film made $9,517.
But see, I don't
And
think it got a big release though.
I don't think
that's
so.
right. Yeah. It's United States gross was $14,000. Its worldwide gross was $500,000. And that's probably including China, which means that's just monopoly money. Nobody ever sees the grosses out of China because they have no copyright laws in China, apparently.
Well, it's a damn shame because everybody involved in here, I think, did a stellar job. It's effective, it's gory, it's very unique and original. Um, the characters are well written and well developed and well performed, and it's a monster like you've really never seen kind of before. It is similar to the Thing, like we talked about, but it's a different, literally a different monster altogether. Um, and I every time I watch this, I'm just more and more impressed.
Yeah.
I went and found the actress Jill. What'd you say her last name was? I can't remember right now.
Wagner.
Jill Wagner. I went and found her Instagram just because I was looking around, and she has like a 500,000 Instagram followers. So she's somebody at least in social media.
Yeah, I think she's gone on to do quite a few things,
She's
either TV
married to a man
shows
in
or.
the army.
Um, but yeah, and I know the Paulo Costanzo. He's in a new series my wife is currently watching because we're watching this, and she's like, "I know who that is."
He's just much younger there.
But no, it's available on. Although I don't know if it ever got a Blu-ray release. I know it's on DVD, but it is well worth your time. It's a really fun movie.
Yeah.
And it's also streaming, as are two of the three films that we're going to talk about tonight. Thanatamorphose, as it's pronounced, from 2012, is definitely not a film for everyone. The film was the directorial debut of Eric Falardeau. I heard him pronounce his name earlier, and I still can't get it quite right because he's a French-Canadian. And it features Caden Rose as a young woman named Laura who is living a pretty depressed and depressing life. She has a small apartment which is visited regularly by her oafish boyfriend, Antoine, and once by a group of her friends. Her daily existence is made up of unfulfilling sex with her boyfriend, who usually doesn't stay the night after their rough couplings. Then she goes to work, and then sometimes she works on a sculpture that she never seems to be able to finish. As mentioned, she has a tiny cadre of friends, one of whom tries unsuccessfully to get her to toss her boyfriend out, insinuating that he'd be a better, at least in the role of sex partner, if not in the role of boyfriend. Most of all, she's clearly battling various psychological issues, including depression and a lot of self-worth issues. And one night, Antoine cuts his foot on a nail in her floor, which may or may not be the catalyst for the substantial amount of grue that follows. And later on, in an act of personal self-love, to not be too explicit, she leaves a red blotch on her crotch, and after that, things really start to cook. A fingernail falls off in the bathroom, purple spots appear on her back, and eventually she begins bleeding from the mouth. And from there, she and us as the audience realize with a growing amount of horror that though she is very much alive, she is nonetheless slowly decomposing. And from there, we essentially just watch her rot away mentally and very, very physically, with her ultimate disillusion functioning both as grade A body horror and maybe also a symbolic meditation on untreated mental illness in the face of a world full of people with agendas that rarely include empathy or basic kindness. And her decision to collect the parts of herself that have fallen off seems seems a lot like a particularly morbid type of sentimentality, which looks like maybe something that's quoting Seth Brundle in Cronenberg's The Fly, but seems to me to be more like another impotent cry for help in a world that seems to have proven to her that it is unwilling to give any. And as I said, this film won't be for everyone. Not only is it patently disgusting, it's also very, very slowly paced. I've seen criticism of the film that says it's essentially 90 minutes of just watching someone rot. In a lot of ways, that's true. But for some of you who might be like me, the idea of decomposing, of painfully rotting away all alone by yourself is the ultimate in terror. And this film might just be horrendously, uncomfortably riveting. I thought so anyway. So I know that my opinion may be unique amongst my co-hosts here. So what did you guys think of Thanatamorphose?
You are a sick bastard. I, as I said in the beginning, when the whole plot is the body horror, that for me personally is a little too much. But there is more to the story than that if you really think about it more. The fact that it to me it was just depressing. Whether or not she either is dealing with mental issues, she has shit friends, she's got a shittier boyfriend, and then when stuff starts to happen, you're just like, oh no, I don't want to be here for this.
Yeah, it definitely does not paint a very cheerful picture of fairness, because she
No,
doesn't seem like the person that these things should be happening to.
no.
I had a tough time with this movie, not so much for the subject matter, though I feel like I may have been a little bit overhyped and was expecting to be like just be thoroughly grossed out and disgusted with this movie, and not that there weren't some scenes that were disgusting, but overall I wasn't thoroughly disgusted at watching the whole film. What things, and I get like, okay, like this woman, she's basically in an abusive relationship. She's taken advantage of by her boyfriend, her friends. She's uninspired with her art, and the whole time she's alive, she's living this dull, mundane, mousy life, and it's not until she starts to internally die, more or less, that she actually she comes to life, through her death, and she takes a stand against these people that are in a sense abusing her. And I get that story, but one of the things that bother me is this woman is rotting, and nobody seems to be. And it's one of the things that bothers me in movies, right? So there's two things that really drive me up a wall in a movie. One is when someone goes into a dark room and doesn't turn on the lights and looks around. Like, I don't understand why people don't do that. It makes no fucking sense. And the others is when something certainly very out of the ordinary or amazing is happening, and no one really seems to pay much attention to it. So you have this woman who's not looking good at all. There's definitely some issues happening. She's rotting, and people come over and, not like, we have to go to the fucking hospital. Like, this is not good. You have a fucking problem. No one really seems to care so much about it. I'm just like, are we dragging this girl? Like, and she's resisting. Obviously she's rotting, and she's not really looking for medical help. She's almost wants to be in this position. But still, someone should be like dragging her out the door to go to the hospital.
Well, and I think that you're right, but I also think that this film, and as I am always resistant to uh, symbolic interpretations that smack of psychoanalysis, but I'll make one here just because I think maybe is one of those unique cases where it is symbolic of something. Um, because she's a nurse, right? That's her
Yeah,
profession.
right.
So the idea that she would not seek medical attention seems ridiculous. And I've thought that before when I've watched this, but then the more I thought about it, I thought, I feel like the message of this movie is that the world is unreliable and that she doesn't trust anything. She doesn't trust the medical profession. She doesn't trust her friends because they've proven themselves to be untrustworthy. She doesn't trust the person that she's her lover because he's proven himself to be untrustworthy. And that's what those people do when they come in and see her in that condition. They don't even see her. All they see is their own disgust and their own feelings about, oh God, don't touch me. And, if somebody vomited on me that I was in a relationship with in the middle of the night, I would be grossed out. But like you said, we'd go to the hospital right then,
Yeah.
and I feel like this movie is not, it's not playing as though these are real things that happen. These are symbols for something, I think. And like I said, I'm very hesitant usually to make that kind of analysis, but it felt symbolic to me. When most things that people see as symbols, I don't agree with them. But here I would go out on a limb and say I don't think that I could judge this movie that way only because I don't feel like it was intentionally realistic.
I don't. That's part of the thing. When I said it, her friends are shit. The guy that kind of wants to be her new boyfriend, even when he comes over the last time, and she's obviously there's something dramatically wrong. It's not like she's just got a few blemishes or whatever. And he's even like, "Well, you should go. Oh, okay. I'm just going to stand here then and let this happen." Fuck that. I mean, Jesus, on multiple levels of what she's doing in the condition that she's in is disturbing
She
as
gives him
hell.
oral sex for the folks who haven't seen the film.
But it's the fact that he's not even that is going to be more important than getting her help. And that's why I walk away going, her whole life is shit. Her friends are terrible. And here's this guy that wants to be the new boyfriend, and you're just as bad as off as her current
Well,
boyfriend.
yeah, I mean that's the thing. Everyone's taking advantage of her. No one really. Everyone's just using her and abusing her. There's no one really friendly or nice. I mean, they're all fake and just out for themselves. It's a tragic situation. I mean, she's a tragic character.
Well,
Um,
I'd almost think that the attempted new boyfriend's even more tragic, but he's allowing this in her condition. I mean,
yeah,
Jesus,
yeah,
come
yeah,
on.
exactly.
And that's why, I think that an interpretation or a reading that tries to hold this thing up to the standards that we would expect out of people is unrealistic because that's not what I think that's not, I don't think that's the path that this film is on. I think it's a highly symbolic film, which is just taking a very dim view of certain kinds of human relationships as being ultimately predatory and unreliable. And that's very much what it feels like. I feel like, and that's so what I said in the introduction is one of the things I think is so true. It feels so lonely in this world
Yeah,
that she's in, she is
sure.
all alone. And I feel like, so I mentioned having C. diff before. One of the things that was really true of that condition is that I felt like nobody was listening to me. My doctors weren't listening to me. I fired my doctor of like a decade in the middle of it because he just wouldn't pay attention to everything that was going on. And so, as somebody, I certainly haven't been sick enough to start collecting my body parts on the nightstand, but I was sick enough to where I felt that sense of like, I'm completely alone in this. Nobody understands what I'm going through, and nobody is reliable. My doctor actually made a joke at one point about like, what I was going through and how I was taking it too seriously. Like, you know, um, and
Walk
so
it
for
off.
me, yeah, walk it off. That's right. Rub a little sand on it. Quit being a little girl is what is almost what he was saying to me at one point. And so for me, there's a resonance here, just because I think that that's what the movie is building a metaphor about. I don't think it's intended to be a realistic portrayal, but it's intended to be when you are going through a thing like this, you just feel tremendously alone.
For sure.
And yeah. So for me, like I said, just it resonated for that reason.
Yeah, for sure. And I absolutely, I see that. Like I said earlier, she was most alive when she was dying, and when she was alive, she was dying.
Yeah.
But it's just those little things, like you have to take it in context that someone should be rushing her to. I mean, she didn't have like a little lip sore or herpes around her mouth or something. She had
Right.
full on rot. When you got
Yeah.
maggots falling out of your body, you got to go to the doctor.
Yeah, 2 out of 3 movies tonight, maggots fall out of people, and that's something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I think
maggots are never a good thing.
yeah.
Yeah, no.
The movie's successful in its grossness and its rot and watching a person decompose, but I think it's also unsuccessful in that same aspect that this movie is just watching a person decompose, and it just goes on a little too long and becomes boring in a sense. And I never thought in my life that watching someone rot I would think is boring, but I was a little like, what, and I think, and again, this movie was in a sense a slave to its budget, because very low budget film. You have this woman rotting, and by making her rot, really what they're doing is putting, black makeup and discoloring makeup on her skin and stuff. But she's never really seemed like she lost any weight since when she was healthy to when she's rotting. Her body mass was always the same. It was all done through makeup. And I know it's a low budget film. They couldn't, this woman's not De Niro, gaining 30 pounds for a Raging Bull or something like that, or what the fuck, macadamia nut that, Batman did to lose all that weight.
The Machinist.
Machinist, yeah.
Macadamia nut.
But it would have been. I think it would have been maybe a little bit more revolting in that sense. But of course, the very end was like kudos and hand clapping for sure.
Well, kudos to Caden Rose, because she's pretty much naked the entire movie.
Yeah.
From the beginning to the end. And granted, it's not something you want to be looking at towards the end, because it is blackened flesh and maggots and stuff.
And poop.
I did find a quote from the director who said, a few years ago, me and my ex-girlfriend were talking and making jokes about someone rotting from the inside. And at the same time, I was working on my master thesis about body fluids in gore and porn films. That's a hell of a thesis.
Yeah. He did a book about that. I don't remember, the title was a French title, but it was obvious that the words gore, porn were in there. So I was like, well, this guy's got his act together. He knows what he wants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so at the beginning I said this is not going to be a movie for everybody. I would never try to argue that this is a movie that's going to resonate with a lot of people. I think it's a very kind of rarefied film that's only going to resonate with certain kinds of people, who maybe even have only had a certain kind of experience. But I find it more resonant every time I watch it. It's very slow. It's it is kind of a one-trick pony. But for me personally, having gone through something that is metaphorically expanded on in this film that felt similar, I thought this is a really good symbolic way to kind of to go through this. And that like you said, the ending of the film from a practical effects standpoint, and also the sound design. I don't want to give away what happens by saying it, but that is a chilling moment. The final frames of this one are I'd stack them up there. If you can make it there, that's at least a big payoff.
And I think a movie like this type of body horror really it forces us to face our own mortality.
Yeah.
Avoid it.
What's that? Oh boy,
or avoid it. Yeah, just nope, not gonna, nope.
Yeah, this is an unpleasant film, And the other film, it's funny because this film and another film, Carcinoma, are two films that I feel like live together in my head. Carcinoma doesn't quite this is almost outside of our kind of stated subject matter because we don't really know where this rot comes from. It's almost not an infection, but it's kind of played like one, so it feels like it kind of fits.
Yeah.
Carcinoma is a film that takes a similar tack, except instead of well, I guess this one sexualizes the illness a little bit a couple of times, but Carcinoma really sexualizes it. But they're similar in how they dwell on the gross things that happen. In Carcinoma, it's, as you would expect, it's about a tumor, a carcinoma, um, a bowel cancer or a stomach cancer or something like that that goes untreated. But there is similar meditation, I feel like, on the really complex emotions that people go through when they're experiencing something that is that devastating, and also kind of like the society around them just keeps behaving the way that it behaves. And so to me, those are two films that live together. They're both very, very much not everybody's cup of tea, but I think that for those of you out there who, if any of what I've said resonates with your own experience, you might give this one a try. Preparing yourself for the very real possibility that you're going to turn it off part of the way through, either because it bores the shit out of you or it grosses you out so much you're like, I vomited, so I'm not watching any more of this.
The funny thing is, last weekend, when I was changing movie posters around, I had Creepshow on, and The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill is very similar to this, and to like what you were saying, Damien, as far as why didn't these people go to the hospital? The same could be said for Jordy when he starts growing, but then he actually goes through the thought process that I can't go because they're going to cut my fingers off and stuff until it goes
Yeah.
too far. But it's kind of the exact same thing, that something is taking over your body, whether it's rot or whatever. And it's sad to sit there and watch that. Granted, Jordy Verrill's a little bit more entertaining than this poor woman and what she goes through. But it's funny, as I was watching this, I'm like, son of a bitch, this is kind of the same thing, just a little bit more colorful.
I will say that that's a really good point, and it's something that so the horror class that I teach at the university that I'm at, I show The Return of the Living Dead, which, it's one of those films that if you've only got 15 films to show in the whole history of the horror genre, you could ask, why are you showing that one? It's not that important. But I show it because of the importance of tone. And what you just said, I think, is a really good thing. I'd never thought about this film being like The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill, but in a lot of ways, it's a point for point. I mean, there's a lot of the same things that exactly happen to these two characters. The details are different, but what they go through is the same, but the difference is tone, right? One of them's funny. Meteor shit.
Yeah.
There are no funny lines in
Yeah.
Thanatamorphose.
Yeah, never in this film does she go, not down there, which she should have been.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said you had a problem with finger trauma. It's funny, for this film and the next film, there are moments where fingernails come off where it's like almost nonchalant, like a fingernail comes off and they're like, "Uh-oh, that's bad,"
Right.
but not.
And I just went to see that movie Abigail last night, and there's a scene where someone's fingernail comes off. I'm like, what the hell is going on with all these movies now that I've watched recently with fingernails coming off?
If they slowly pull him off, that even bothers me.
Oh no, actually, it wasn't Abigail. It was Immaculate. Someone.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But it's when they're breaking, when they fall and are scratching, and the fingernail breaks.
Uh-huh.
That does it. I'm out. I'm done. I can't do that.
Or
What happens if they stick it in somebody's eye and it breaks off in their eye? Is that?
Well, hey, eye gore is always good. There's never a point where you're like, ooh, that's too much.
or Beyond the Darkness, where they're pulled out of your hand with a pair of pliers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, and I think it always goes to, it seems feasible instead of, zombies attacking or whatever. It seems like that could happen. And
Mhm.
and I do remember that was the only part of the House of Wax remake that I thought was good, as a girl sticking her fingers up through the floorboard, and there's a guy with the clippers and just goes snip. That was the only part that I went, oh fuck no.
It's funny though. You're right. There is something about that that's horrifying, and not to overshare, but I walk a lot. So a while back, meaning that I go on walks a lot, it's not uncommon for me to get, whenever it's nice outside, for me to get 15, 17, 20,000 steps in. And last summer, I was doing a lot of walking, and one of my toenails just fell off. Didn't hurt at all,
Ah,
but it just
All
fell
right,
off.
too much. Too
end of
much.
story now.
Too much.
But
Next
here's
movie.
the thing. Here's the thing. It's so ingrained in us to be horrified by it that even though there was no sensation or pain whatsoever, I was like, "Oh my fucking God, what's going on?"
That would bother me more that there was no pain or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're
I'm
right.
not a
I mean,
fan of
that's
that.
it's they were really smart about doing that in this film and showing these things that really get under your skin because it makes it visceral, you know. And
Yeah.
again, I mentioned the poop part, but it's not nearly as explicit as some of the defecation stuff in the movie I mentioned, Carcinoma, but there is a particularly gross part. But that would be expected, right? You would become incontinent probably if you were rotting away. And I thought it
Right.
was brave that they chose to do it, if also really gross.
I honestly thought there'd be more of it in this.
I'm glad
Yeah.
there wasn't.
Not see it. I'm not saying I wanted it, but I was expecting it.
Yeah, it's
It
understated
was
here.
okay if it had more poop.
And once again, I don't mean to keep pointing it out too much. If you're looking for more poop, Carcinoma is the movie for you, because that bowel cancer produces some pretty poopy scenes. But yeah, I thought that this movie was grim and horrible, and not horrible beautiful, just straight up horrible. But I still find it very compelling. I read a review that said this is not the kind of horror movie that I would want to watch every day. And I completely agree with that. I've seen it 3 times
Yes.
now, and it's years between viewings. But I will certainly, assuming that I live another 10 or 15 or 20 years, I'm sure I'll watch this movie again.
I think the only entertainment value I'm going to get out of this movie ever is when I pass it on to other people.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I got one for you. Here, watch this one.
Are you going to play it for Turkey Day?
No, God, no.
Can you imagine?
There would not be a lot of pizza being eaten that
Right.
time.
I was gonna say that's gonna be the one time people are gonna be like, "Yeah, I don't want any of Dawn's pizza."
And
This
people
is a
are going to be
carcinoma
mad.
pizza.
Yeah, that's right. A carcinoma. You should just make it with like chocolate and black truffles and stuff.
Ugh. Put
What
some
looks like
kidneys on there.
fingernails? What
Almonds.
looks like fingernails?
Almonds.
Almonds. There you go. Almond truffle pizza. This is the Thanatamorphose. Dig in, everybody.
Okay, so our next movie.
Because that's so much better.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, our next movie almost feels like a remake of this movie to me. I feel like people went, this movie doesn't move fast enough and not enough stuff happens. Let's make this movie again that does that.
Slept in pretty late this morning.
You feeling okay?
Don't even start with that.
I ask because I care.
What seems to be the problem?
Something's wrong.
Are you sexually active? Are you using protection?
Whatever's happening to me is getting worse.
Do not come into contact with anyone until we can determine what it is we're dealing with.
You were right. There's something wrong with me.
So my movie is Contracted from 2013. It was directed and written by Eric England. Najara Townsend plays Samantha, a young girl who is an up-and-coming botanist as she tends to her prize-winning orchids. She is also an up-and-coming lesbian as she is head over heels for Nikki, who certainly doesn't seem to share Sam's enthusiasm in their relationship. Oh, and she is also a recovering drug addict living with her single mom, played by Carolyn Williams from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. One evening, Samantha is at a party thrown by one of her friends who force feeds her shots and breaks down her inhibitions. Throughout the evening, we see Samantha is being stalked by a mysterious man who we never quite get a good glimpse of, as he is always purposely out of focus on the camera. When Sam is at her most vulnerable, this mysterious man makes his move, assumingly slipping a roofie in her drink. The two find their way back to his car, where he forces himself upon her. The next day, Samantha awakes in her bed with seemingly a bad hangover and regret of what happened the night before. But this is no normal hangover, nor is it an STD as her doctor seems to be somewhat certain of. Over the next 3 days, she has a massive vaginal bleeding, her fingernails fall off, her eyes turn red, her teeth blacken, her hair falls out. She develops cankerous sores, and maggots spill from a place you would never want them to spill from on a woman's body. And this is just the beginning to what climaxes as a somewhat out of left field ending that leaves you wanting more. I think this film works precisely because the illness that she's going through is never really like Thanatamorphose. It's never really explained. You don't know what this particular illness is or whatever she's going through, but it's happening, and we just kind of deal with it. I mean, in the beginning, you kind of put it together what caused it, but it's we have to, it's not obviously a real thing that can happen that we perhaps know of. I really like this movie a lot. I think it's another one that's like Splinter, is short, quick, to the point, but also like our last movie, there's scenes in it that drive me crazy because this girl is, again, rotting, and people are not rushing her to the hospital immediately. And she's also, as our other character, kind of like back offish, like, oh, I don't need to go. I'm not going to go. She does go to the doctor in it, who keeps telling her it's an STD. We need to do blood tests. I can't give you like antibiotics or any of that shit. But there's towards the end where her fucking eyes are turning red and shit like that, and drag this girl to the hospital already. This is not a normal thing.
So, first of all, when she goes to the doctor, she leaves out certain things. And at some point, when he noted, was there something else? And she's like, well, I just have a really bad head cold and a rash. You're like, bitch, you got more going on than just a rash. You got some weird shit going on. But she's in denial or is too embarrassed, which I could understand if especially if it is an STD. But from what we see in the beginning, the guy that gives it to her is a mortician or someone works in the morgue, and he's fucking corpses. That's how this starts. And the best part is that the actor that plays him, that we never see him, is Simon Barrett, who just wrote the new Godzilla Kong movie. So he's apparently he's apparently moved up the chain where he's doing fairly well now from going as a corpse fucking roofie slipping rapist. Now he's writing big budgeted Hollywood films.
Huh.
Like the previous film, there's not a good character in this film.
That's what I was going to say. I hate every one of these motherfuckers.
Yes. And they're not, they all seem to have their own plan of what they want to do. Even we even have another guy that wants to be a boyfriend, even though she's a lesbian. And an opportunity exists for him to score, and he takes it, even though she is obviously not well.
Yeah.
And obviously it doesn't go well for him either. But it's one of those things that's like, Jesus Christ, people, you're just going to not pay attention to all this stuff?
Yeah.
And still go through with that?
Guys are so horny, they're willing to fuck rotting, diseased girls.
Not all of them. Not all of them. But I will say, and the funny thing is as I was watching this, I immediately thought of Erin, because as she's on her way to the doctor, she works at a restaurant, and her boss calls her and says, I need you to come into work. Someone called off. I need you to come in. And her one eye is all fucked up and red and blah, 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 blah. And she goes into work and she's prepping food.
She's making a salad with her bare hands.
Yes.
She's working with raw vegetables.
Look, I lost a fingernail. Wonder where that went. Ugh. And I'm sitting there going, Erin is probably pacing in front of the TV. Nope.
Well, and it's that what we were talking about before. When I watched this, both of my eyes were completely bloodshot, like completely filled with red blood, both of them. I was sick with a mystery illness. I was super nauseated. I had a killer headache. So I'm experiencing low level versions of all those symptoms, and I'm watching somebody violate food while they're doing it, and I'm like, and I don't like anybody in this movie. I mean, this movie should win an award for the most detestable setting. I don't like the main character. I think her girlfriend was a piece of shit. Her
Yeah.
mom's a piece of shit. I mean, they're all terrible every one of them.
Yes.
I don't like anybody in this movie.
Yeah, I think that's one of the movie's weaknesses is none of the characters really have chemistry with each other. None of them gel well. I mean, this woman is so in love with her lesbian lover, but her lesbian lover could be like Nikki could give two shits about him though. Why is she so head over heels for this girl who treats her like shit and completely uninterested in her? Carolyn Williams, right? She's like, oh, let's go. I thought we'd have a nice dinner together. Sit down, have a nice dinner. What the fuck is wrong with you? I don't want to eat with you. She like lashes out of her mother for like almost no reason. Like, God, you're like so controlling and stuff. It's like, all she said was like, let's sit down and have dinner together. It like the characters just didn't gel with each other, and I think that's where the movie fails. But I think one of its strengths is the main character. Because in its writing, we know a lot about her backstory we know, she was a drug addict. We know she's in love with other women and she's like winning awards with growing her orchids and stuff. And they never really come out and tell us any of these things. They show it to us and we kind of put pieces together through her actions and stuff. And I thought that was really good. And this girl or the actress, I should say, is in every single scene of the movie. So she carries this movie herself. And I thought she, again, while doing somewhat unrealistic things when your body's falling apart, thought she did a good job from starting off to how she was to where she ends up towards the end.
I do call bullshit on the doctor because when she's either she pulls her shirt up or down by her waist, and there's black lines and stuff forming and shit. And he's even like backs up and goes, what the? Why are you not admitting her like right now? Oh, here. Ooh, rub some salve on that. What? Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then she goes over to her friend's house and, she doesn't really have any friends. She just has these pieces of shit that she hangs out with. And she's got like spider veins, like zombie veins growing on her face, visibly on her face and neck. One of her eyes is clearly dead. I mean, it's completely white and gooed over. And they're all like, they're still talking like things are normal, you know?
Right.
And I'll tell you, there is the separation for me between these two films because Thanatamorphose plays it in this kind of surreal way. You're never sometimes sure what's a dream and what's not. But this film chooses to play everything very realistically. I mean, you're injected into the world and it's supposed to be happening. And so there was a lot of times where I was like, I got to call bullshit on this. There's no way that even if you're mad at your friend, you're not like, dude, what's going on? Right. I mean, if you actually were ever friends, you don't stop and go, your eye is really bad. We got to go. We got to go to the doctor,
Again, that's definitely one of my part that bothered me the most in this movie, but I did really enjoy this movie a lot. I do really like this film.
Yeah, I mean, they build great suspense in this movie. They really do a good job of that. I feel like that's the one thing I really liked about it. There's a ton of moments where you're like, oh God, what's going to happen next?
Exactly. And then when you get to the end, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen next.
I do think one of the most honest characters in here is the drug dealer friend. Because when she goes over there to get some drugs to whatever she's doing it for, I don't know. And the other friend shows up and then the girl takes her glasses off and the dealer just backs up and goes, I'm way too high for this right now. And I love the fact that he is the one that admits something's fucked up going here. Something is completely wrong. And I can't handle this right now.
Yeah. And when we first meet that character and she first sees him at the party, he makes some kind of comment about, oh, does she need anything? How's she doing and stuff? and we don't really get what that's about. But as the story goes on, we put together like, oh, that's her old dealer,
Yeah.
and that's why she's going back to him. So I thought the movie was very creative in that aspect by not force feeding a backstory to us so much, letting us put it together without really saying it.
Yeah. But then again, it also makes him to be a shit too, because if he knows that she's a recovering addict, why is he going? Does she need anything? Is she okay?
Well, I don't think
Fuck you, you're the one. Yeah.
they're not really reputable people generally.
Oh my God. Our world's crushed.
One of the things I really liked about this film was that relationship with the doctor on one level, though, because there was a really nice moment in there where she's like, like she's trying to act like everything's still okay, and the doctor is her witness, and the witness is often one of my favorite characters in a film because the witness is the character that tells the audience and the main character very often that things really aren't okay, and the audience usually knows it already, but it's often a time where the main character gets to see what's going on. Yeah, you need that witness character, and she's kind of like she's wanting everything to be okay, so she's like, I'm sure I'm okay or whatever. I just figured I'd come to the doctor, and the doctor's kind of like, I don't know, things don't look like they're great, so. Uh, I thought that was a nice little sequence because we do have this desire. I think we go to the doctor because we expect them to tell us, you know, well, it's probably not a big deal. You're
Right.
probably overthinking it. And instead she goes and she's like, oh, he's probably going to tell me it's not a big deal. And the doctor's like, this looks like a problem. This doesn't look normal. This doesn't look quite right.
Sure, right. I mean, when you get sick enough to go to the doctor or something that's unknown to you with your sickness, you're in a deniability that you are afraid that it's something much worse, and you don't want to get that answer. And obviously she was in a situation where she's got like fucking massive vaginal bleeding constantly, and she's afraid that it's something much worse, and she doesn't want to admit or have to face that truth. So she's kind of like, yeah, reluctant to tell the doctor everything because she doesn't want to hear it herself.
But it's hard for me to believe that the director of this film did not see Thanatamorphose. I mean, there are scenes that are one for one. Like, for
Yeah.
example, there's a scene where she's trying to cover up everything with makeup, which I think is such a great scene in both movies, by the way. We didn't talk about it in Thanatamorphose, but there's a scene in there where the main character is trying to like, oh, maybe I can just put makeup over my rot. And the same thing's true here, but except it happens in Thanatamorphose, it happens fairly early on where she's like, oh, no big deal. I can probably cover this up. But in this one, it happens at the end of the film where she not all the way at the end, but closer to the end where she decides to do this makeup thing. And I thought that was a really nice commentary, because I have a weird relationship with makeup philosophically where I'm like, this whole idea of us using all these products to look like we don't actually look um, seems to me to be something, a commentary on how our psyches work. And this is just more of that, right? Where it's like, you don't look like that at all, sister. You look damaged. But she's like, doot, doot, doot. Am
I
I
have
pretty?
to, and I don't know. I have to feel like the directors did not see Thanatopomorphosis beforehand. It's such a somewhat low budget underground film. I don't know how widely known it would have been literally a year later.
It would be very difficult, and it's just one of those strange things where themes and even scenes crop up they're the same scene. Like I said,
Yeah.
the scene where she's in the mirror, like trying to dress up this obvious issue, and then also, in Thanatomorpho, she picks some maggots out of her chest, and it felt like in this movie they're like, where the maggots are coming from in this movie, south.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's one of those things that when she comes out of the bathroom or whatever and you see one single maggot on the toilet seat, boy, that is just the beginning. But much like our previous film, major kudos to Najara Townsend, the main actress, because she's on screen, like you said, throughout pretty much the entire film. She got a lot of makeup. She's not naked like in the first in the previous film, but I think she really brings that character to life. Not a nice character, but she really pulls that off, and that's a shit ton of makeup she's dealing with.
Yeah, and yeah, those contacts and stuff. Had to be a nightmare. Like I imagine I can't even fucking put contacts in to see, let alone some kind of
Yeah.
colored.
Well, those contacts are the ones that are fit the whole front of the eye to cover
Yeah,
everything, and those are not fun to wear, from what I'm told.
and so again, this is another director who, while I really like this film a lot, never really went on to do anything else in the horror genre that was stand out.
That seems to be a theme for this evening.
Yeah.
And it could be, and again, these are low budget films, right? I'm probably could say with somewhat certainty that financing is probably really fucking difficult to get when you're not doing a huge return on your movies.
Which is strange because when Contracted came out, that made a lot of buzz. I mean, it was, whether it went straight to screaming, whether it went straight to streaming or not.
Oh, people were screaming.
Yeah, yeah. It was well known. It made a lot of noise when it came out. So that is weird that whether or not it made the budget back. I mean, they made a sequel to it, so it had to have been popular enough to make them go back for that.
Have you seen the sequel?
I have not
No,
seen
and
the sequel. Have you? Or
I don't know if I want to.
no? I actually heard that it wasn't very good, and from what I read about it, it seems to take what happens at the end and expand upon it, but in looking for a cure. And I think that takes away everything that this movie is.
This movie, like the previous one, is about bad things happening to bad people,
Yeah.
which makes you think it would be a fun movie to watch, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. It's more fun than the previous movie, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely very disgusting things in the second movie. There was some of the things in this maybe cringe a little bit more, the way they were portrayed, and I don't know if that's just a more of a makeup job or what, but they're fucking disgusting.
Honestly,
These are gross movies.
I
Body
think
horror is not enjoyable.
that-
It's never
It can be though.
enjoyable.
You think like the Toxic Avenger is body horror, Slime City is body horror, Street Trash is body horror, and those movies are a riot. I
Right.
mean, it's
Yeah,
just so
yeah.
weird that that they live in the same genre. I think that's one of the most fascinating dichotomies. Because for the folks out there, when we started doing this episode, it was just kind of like body horror that's not Cronenberg, and these guys picked their films, and I was really on the fence, and it wasn't until I kind of came to Thanatamorphose that we sort of concentrated it down on Infection and Contagion. But originally I was thinking of Slime City, and what a completely different kind of movie a Slime City or a Body Melt is to then Contracted or Splinter.
Yeah.
Splinter has a couple of little entertaining moments, a couple of times when it ratchets down, but these other two movies, once they get going, it's just like, here's some more. And here's some more,
Even the worst of the worst character in Splinter, you love compared to any of the characters in these two films. And I think that's the
Right.
difference when you compare like the Slime City or even like in The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly, you have this pathos towards Brundle. You feel bad for him, what he's going through. In these films, you don't give a shit about these people. You hate these people. So it's weird that you would almost be cheering bad things to happen for them, but you're just wallowing in this muck and maggots and shit. And
The worst character in Splinter redeems himself by the end. There is no redemption with either of the characters in our final two films.
No, I don't ever feel like the main character in Thanatamorphose proves herself to be anything. I mean, her biggest sin is that she's a pin cushion, that she lets people walk on her. And certainly she does some pretty crappy things, but I don't think she does them to people who didn't have it coming.
Right. It's a revenge almost story in a sense.
Yeah, whereas in this movie, the big difference in in our final film in Contracted is that I don't like the main character either. You know,
right?
She's also unlikable.
I think in Thanatamorphose, she has more of an obvious mental issues going on, whereas in Contracted, it's almost like she has more of a social mental illness. I don't know if I don't think she has as big of a problem as in the previous one.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see her, I guess in both movies too, you see the personality deteriorate along with the body.
Yeah.
Because she does lash out more at her mother, especially towards the end when she's, again, another scene where her fucking teeth are blackened and shit. And her like, how does her mother not fucking clock her over the head and drag her? Because like something is goddamn wrong when your teeth are black. Within 3 days, right? So this whole movie happens within 3 days. I mean, she goes south fast.
Yeah, and before that, it's obvious that they picked somebody who is like, generically attractive, in as much as she's somebody who I think most people would go, okay, that's a pretty young girl or a pretty young woman, right? And then she's not at all by the end of it. She's pretty beat up. Pretty beat up. That's an understatement, isn't it?
She's icky.
Yeah. But I do love that she tries to sexy up there at the end, Also, the one thing I don't really understand is the shit on the side of her mouth, is that like a cut or is that just goop leaking out? And if so, why didn't she just wipe it off?
I think that's sores.
Yeah, I think it was like sores. So I guess one thing we have learned from, if you have a body rot disease, you do get sexually charged. Apparently.
John looks happy about that.
No, that's well. Not only that, apparently you're emitting these pheromones because the guys around you are going, yeah, "I'd hit that."
Yeah.
There you
Which
go.
seems very unreasonable to me.
Yes, I'm sorry. There's no. Oh my god.
I like in Contracted where it's like, oh, there's maggots coming out. That's going to be the part that I vomit about. It's like, there's plenty of other things going on here that are worth vomiting about,
Yeah.
The dead eye being one.
The what?
The dead eye.
The dead eye. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that fucking Poe story, right? With the milky white eye.
Yeah.
Hey, can you not look at me with that one eye when I'm...
Brought you that eye patch. Let's role playing.
Man. I don't want to give too much away, but man, when that guy goes, "You're so wet," I was like,
"Oh, you ain't kidding." She should have said, "Yes, we are."
Yeah. Well, good Lord.
That was a great line. I was like, "Well, that drove it home, didn't it?" Holy shit! I didn't expect that.
Oh, yeah. Neither did he.
Yeah. And that is another funny thing. This movie isn't quite as pessimistic on some levels as Thanatamorphose, but it's real close. It's real close. One thing I noticed too that I really liked is her prize flowers. By the time she got it, she decided she was going to take, she's trying to salvage something out of her obviously, fast decomposing life. And she's like, I'm going to take my flowers in and get them judged. And by the time she gets them there, just by being in proximity to her, they've died. Right.
Yeah.
Like she's emitting. That's right. She's emitting death somehow, which I thought was kind of great.
Mm.
But I thought it was weird how Carolyn Williams's character kind of changes from being kind of vaguely understanding at first to, like you said, as she's physically changing and her teeth are turning black, she's like, "Never in this house again." And I guess they brought the pastor over or whatever.
Right. That's just where these characters weren't jiving with each other very well.
Yeah.
But if she's a recovering drug addict, there's a lot of trust issues there.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the mom is immediately going to be on the defensive and not going to believe anything that she's telling her
yeah.
if the mom thinks that she's using again. So I can kind of almost understand that, but then again, bringing a fucking pastor to solve a drug problem, really effective, really effective. Maybe if you have leprosy, although she was probably
Yeah,
close.
she was definitely a candidate. So, body horror. Woo!
Yeah.
Feel good films of the year.
It was an interesting ride, but I enjoyed taking it generally, except for that period where I was incapable of it because I was too sick to do so.
Out of both of these films, because I still don't think Splinter is on the same level of ickiness as these two are. Um, the part with the restaurant is probably disturbed me, other than the maggots at the end of Contracted, but um, that I think was more like, oh no, you know, the whole fact that she's obviously has some serious illness and she's just handling food and all of this stuff, that probably got me more disgusted than most of the other stuff.
Yeah, that was a bad moment. That was definitely a moment where I was like, "Come on, man. Do you want me to like these characters less somehow?"
That's what I picture Aaron as Jordy Verrill. No, no, no.
Yeah, I was not having it with that movie at that moment. You're right. I was up pacing around my living room like, "Come on, that's horrible."
Yeah, so definitely some movies you want to watch bring the family over, sit down and pop some popcorn
Pop some corn, extra butter, real wet.
and
Um,
real wet. Put some almonds in it.
Side of maggots.
I do think though that one of the things that I love about horror is that there are people who don't like horror who see it as a one-dimensional genre, and I feel like it's such a multi-dimensional genre, and there are places for fun films, there are places for cerebral films, and I think that there's really a place for all three of the films that we watched for this episode. They aren't the ones they're probably not the easiest ones or the most accessible ones, but they do serve a purpose in kind of examining the negative emotions that you're kind of intentionally trying to examine sometimes in the horror genre. And so I'm glad we did the episode, because these things all kind of just kind of get tagged with body horror, and then kind of, nobody talks about them in context, but I think that
Yeah,
they have something in common,
for sure. And I think these movies aren't really talked about enough or brought up enough when you're sitting around a campfire, and they should be. Like, if someone's asking, like, oh, what's a good movie that I haven't seen? There you go. Pick any one of these.
So we hope your shots are up to date and your health insurance is all paid up. As, after an episode like this, you might want to be reassured that help is out there when the body parts start going bad and the maggots arrive. But do you find this sort of thing compelling at all? Come tell us all about it on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram. And if you listen somewhere that you can rate us, please do, as it really helps us out. And if you get a chance, maybe challenge yourself with some particularly gruesome body horror this week. I can't guarantee it'll be good for you, but you never know. And it's better than Ebola for sure.